I'm joining you today from Peterborough, actually, because I'm just about to visit the CIPS head office, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. But for now, it's great to join you. And normally from Cardiff University, so obviously I've had a fair journey to get here today. But it's an absolute joy to be part of this very, very important summit today. So thank you, whatimpact, for inviting me to be part of this. I hope that what I share with you might give you something to think about. It's based on work that I've been ongoing with Business Wales and the Welsh Government Department for Economy for around about 18 months, although actually the notion of collaborative working is something that I've spent a lifetime working on. So in my day job, I teach, research, and manage PhD students, and all sorts of other engagement activities.
Claire, I just wanted to say a huge thank you.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the Procurement Act, the PPN 002, so the Procurement Policy Notice 002, the Social Partnership and Procurement Act, which is, or it's actually the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act, which is relevant to anybody from Wales here today, or anybody that's interested in contracting opportunities for Wales. And what do these policies mean for VCSEs? So even though my background is in Wales, I'm going to talk more generally because I know we've got audience joining us today from all over the UK. Procurement reform hasn't just been happening in the UK, it's been happening worldwide. And actually, until 2018, the evidence suggests that there was an overall decline in public spending with social enterprises. But actually, the pandemic did bring some positivity in that there was a real pivotal moment, in fact, when public sector organisations were struggling to be able to source overseas. Obviously, they needed to turn locally, and within the local communities, it was an opportunity to engage more with social enterprise, voluntary sector, charities, and community-led organisations. So as we stand currently looking at Tussle data, so you can use Tussle, or Delta will be another fantastic platform to be able to gather important information like this. VCAs certainly represent just over around about 81 billion from the public sector. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but it's still only 8% of the total spend. The good news is that over a 5-year period, there is an upward trajectory in terms of the amount of money that's going not only to VCSEs, but to SMEs. But most of the spend is coming from, we'll notice, is coming from local government, local authority, or council spending. And you can see the stats here in front of you. In terms of industry sectors, health and social care is by far the biggest sector where contracts are being awarded to VCSEs. But more frequently and more often, what you then tend to see is that VCSEs become subcontracted partners rather than immediate contracting partners. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So what I've looked at here is over across the 4 nations in the UK, what is the attitude and the ambition in terms of engaging more through procurement reform to work with the VCSE community? The good news that it's a really positive one, and that in each of the 4 nations there is explicit mention to VCSEs, and that encouraging the buyers to engage much more, particularly at early market engagement stage. So what we're seeing since the Procurement Act, of course, is that there is a requirement to remove barriers. So procurement professionals have to remove barriers for SMEs and VCSEs to be able to tender. So we're looking at a much more inclusive, socially responsible type of procurement. In Wales, we have something, not quite ready for that one yet. In Wales, we have something called a Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act, which really talks about fair work. And what's really important here, and I'm sure that Claire would have mentioned this earlier on, is this 30-day payment mechanism. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some public bodies that will pay less than 30 days, 7 to 10 days, I hear. But actually, there is a mandatory requirement now that all public sector organisations pay within a 30-day period. During the tender process, if you're interested in tendering for public contracts, there is also going to be a requirement that not only do they pay you within 30 days, but that you pay your subcontractors within 30 days as well. So this procurement reform period is not only an opportunity to kind of build credibility in your own business, but it's also an opportunity for you to think about what your supply chain looks like and how you manage it as well. So these are really important factors. The issue around late payment is also really a very strong campaign led by the Small Business Commissioner, Emma Jones, at the moment, called Free the Founder. And she's doing work actively right across the whole of the UK, encouraging businesses to make payment a real key priority. So I won't dwell too much on that one anymore, but I think it is an important factor to note. In Scotland, they have an action plan between 24 and 26 and encouraging buyers again to engage with SMEs and the third sector. And in Northern Ireland, similarly to England, they're setting spend targets against procurement with SMEs and the VCSE community. Interestingly, actually, only last month, it came into force that in England, they are able to stipulate that they would, under threshold value, that they would work with local businesses, which means that they are more likely to be able to attract opportunities for SMEs and VCSEs. That isn't actually a mandatory requirement in Wales, although it is strongly encouraged under smarter procurement, socially responsible procurement. So really what we're seeing is a radical shake-up. I really don't think we have to be realistic here. And there were 36,000 buyers, I think, trained in preparation for the Procurement Act coming live last year. And of course, we're now 1 year on from that act becoming mandatory. But, you can't expect results overnight. But I would like to see that now that we are 1 year in, you will now start to see a lot of changes coming forward. And you will start to see much more engagement opportunities for you to learn a bit more about the contract opportunities forthcoming. Thank you. Next slide. So I believe that this is what I call a new dawn, a new opportunity. I think that looks like the steps to heaven, but hopefully it's a very pleasant one at this rate. And I've been working with the Welsh Government and Business Wales to write a supplier guide, which is going to be very soon published with some accompanying videos, which basically talks suppliers through 6 steps. This is now an opportunity to really make sure that you're building as much credibility in your own organisation before you become contract ready. And that particularly applies to voluntary sector, social enterprise, community-led organisations. Because if you want to be seen as an equal partner, an equal opportunity with other larger businesses in the tender process, it's important that you start to build that credibility. So important that understanding that the public sector process has very stringent regulations in which they operate. The Procurement Act gives them some sense of agility and flexibility. And as I've explained currently, there's definitely a door open to engage much more with local social enterprise, voluntary and community-led organisations. But you have to be visible. So in Wales, we have a platform called Sell to Wales. UK-wide, we use something called the Central Digital Platform. Scotland has its own platform and Northern Ireland have their own platform. If you're not registered on these platforms, the public buyer doesn't know you exist. So it's really important that you are registered on those platforms. Because they become their yellow pages, if you like, in old-fashioned terms, and they will be able to identify relevant suppliers to invite them to market engagement events that may be forthcoming. So being visible is really important. So it's time to develop your corporate CV, make sure that it's up to date, make sure that it's representative, make sure that the email and contact telephone numbers are relevant, accurate and updated. These are really important factors. And it's important that if you get the chance to engage with supplier expos and meet the buyer events, then do attend them. There's huge benefits for you as an organisation. I know that historically people have felt a little bit nervous about attending these events because they might be dominated by very large businesses and feel actually nobody's going to really want to be interested in my business. But absolutely everybody will be interested in your business and what you offer and how they could potentially collaborate with you to be part of the future contract opportunities. So it is time to invest in your business, to think about getting yourself insured from a professional liability, indemnity potential, but also from a cybersecurity potential. Because if you were to be successful in tendering for a public contract, you would have to be ready to hit the ground running. So really do take advice and guidance from supplier support agencies to help you build that credibility in your business. And of course, thinking about when you're bid writing, again, take advice on how to really position yourself. Remember that even if the public buyer knows you as an individual and as an organisation, they can only award a contract based on what's written in that tender response. So actually thinking about if you're not brilliant at writing bids yourself, then you might want to take some help. I would add a caution on using AI. Don't over rely on AI. And definitely don't input commercial information, commercially sensitive information into digital platforms that are available on the World Wide Web, because of course that's your commercial sensitivity and your USP. So I think that's really important. But also important for you to think about is that buyers now have to weight at least 10% on social value for contracts above threshold. And it may be that your business is part of that social value offering. So again, this gives massive opportunity for you in the VCSE community to be able to be part of the public contracting opportunities that are coming ahead. Thank you. One of the easiest ways to break down barriers for smaller businesses, and I'm particularly passionate, I lead small business training back at Cardiff Business School on a program called Help to Grow Management. It keeps me very close to what the business challenges are at that current period. And one of the biggest barriers is really turnover of the organisation, and maybe that it feels that the contract value is completely out of reach because you haven't got the scale and capacity to be able to be part of that opportunity. And so this obviously opens the door to collaborative opportunities. But when people talk about collaboration, the reality is that very few large and small organization, however experienced, quite often misinterpret what good collaboration looks like. And the fact that it is based on a mutuality of agreements, wants and needs, working better together. Yeah. So I think number one question is, would you be ready to collaborate if it meant that you could stand a much better chance at winning a public contract? Next slide, please. So this is the piece of work that I've been doing with Business Wales, and we hope that it will be published very soon. There's actually a guide available from 2012 under the Welsh Government. You can just type in Wales joint bidding, it'll come up straight away. It's a little bit out of date though. And so what I've done is I've updated the guide and made it very practical, and it's much more a how to collaborate and how to form a consortium. And I've based it down to these 8 phases. I feel like by taking this kind of step-by-step approach, it doesn't become too overwhelming, and it helps people to have a pause and a reflect before moving on to the next element. So this is some of the work that I'm just sharing with you, courtesy of Business Wales. The property of this belongs to Business Wales, and it's funded by the Welsh Government Department for Economy. So basically, the first question is why collaborate? Understanding why that might be important to you as an organisation. And importantly, are you ready to collaborate to be able to share information with others and not be worried that you're going to lose your USP, your IP, and so on. So it's about thinking very carefully about whether you are, in that space, first of all. It depends on possibly the experience that you have. And maybe the length and duration of which your business has been running, and so on. It could be a whole number of different factors. But I think that why collaborate and how it's going to help my business to grow is going to be really, really important. Number 2 is to think about who we should partner with and why. And I'll just go through a couple of steps that you can take to help you with partner selection in a moment. So I won't dwell on that too much now. But importantly, if you're going to collaborate, you're inevitably going to be sharing information, as we would know as data in some way. So you really do need to think that if you're going to be doing that, what kind of data do you need to ensure that you are better prepared to deliver that contract more effectively? importantly, how are you going to share that information collectively so that everybody has access to it? And will your partners be sharing with you? So I think this is a really, really important fact, because quite often one of the areas where partnership working can really fall down. Some assume that if I want to share something, that somebody will share something back with me. But of course, if you haven't pre-agreed this, then of course it can have ramifications, particularly when we are communicating electronically. You send an email out and say, oh, here, by the way, here's my client data, or here's my projection for the next 6 months. Would you mind sending me yours? And suddenly there's this kind of wall of silence, and you think, hang on, what's going on here? And that can be perceived as kind of a breakdown of trust, or but actually it can be very, very different reasons. So I think early conversations about what information you need within the collaboration can be really important, because then there are no surprises later on, and it's okay to say no. I think that's the most important thing. But let's establish those boundaries at the outset, and don't wait for things to happen when you're delivering the contract and you actually rely on that information coming through and somebody's not forthcoming with that. So I think really important to think about those things early on. How will you resource the partnership? Because remember that if you're working in partnership with other businesses to fulfill the needs of a public contract, this is running alongside the rest of your business. So, think about overall what the dependency factor might be. How much of this contract would be worth representative of your overall turnover? I wouldn't suggest that you use any more than 40 to 50% of your overall turnover to go for this public sector opportunity through a consortium arrangement, because it can represent, high risk for the rest of your business developing. So, but it might be worth, say, 40% to your business, but it might only be worth 5%. It's really important to think about this, because when it comes to capacity and it comes to communication, having an effective communications plan, if one of the partner organisations only treats this contract opportunity as a very small representation of their overall turnover, they might not be quite so quick at replying to emails and so on. So it's important to establish that at the outset, so that you kind of help set expectations about how you're going to manage the communication and review process throughout contract delivery. And importantly, it's important when you're collaborating to use a structured approach. There's lots of research evidence that shows that a loose coupling approach tends to be the kind of default mode, yet we'll bring you in as and when we need you. And that's a typical subcontracting arrangement. That means you're not actually guaranteed the work, and you maybe not feel really valued. And to be honest with you, if you're only really going to be, collaborating just to win a contract, it's not really enough. You need to be collaborating because you recognize that there are going to be huge benefits, only to you as a leader, but also to your organization in terms of learning, skills development. Of course, that will lead to business growth opportunities in the future as well. So it's important to really kind of think about these things here. And then, of course, collectively, if we're using a structured approach, how will we develop value in the future? The exit strategy is not something thought about until you come to the end of contract delivery, the final phase. But actually, it's really important in a consortium arrangement to think about it at the outset. And of course, as you go through the project delivery, you're going to be reviewing the elements of exit. For example, if you had 4 partners collaborating as a consortium to win a public contract, what happens? We wouldn't like to think that happened, but what happens if one of the companies goes into administration? What happens if there's a merger happening within one of the partners? It's really important to kind of think about contingencies if some of these things happen. What happens if somebody goes ill? It's happened to me in projects that I manage, and you really do have to have a plan in place for the just in case. So, there's a lot of upfront planning involved if you take collaboration seriously, and you need to be able to do that if you want to win public contracts through this kind of structure. So ultimately, there are massive benefits of forming a consortium, but you need to follow a structured approach for doing that. If we could move to the next slide, please. So I'm just picking out a couple of the phases, of course, which I go into a lot more depth, and I'm happy to address any questions on this. The SWOT matrix is one of the most popular frameworks, but it's also one of the most used frameworks used in business management. The reason is because people don't understand the dependency between internal and external factors. So internal factors of your organization, it's good to reflect on what you think your core strengths are. You can make this as complex or as simple as you want. Basically, think about 3 bullet points of what your core strengths are. They become then the things that you can offer your partner. Yeah, they're the strengths that you offer your partner. What are you not so great at? Okay, if you're not so great at it, of course, that's why you're looking to work in a partnership arrangement, because hopefully your partners will be able to bring those in as their strengths. If you've got complementary strengths and weaknesses, this prevents you then from, losing market share and from developing future opportunities together. And for example, in this instance, we're looking at winning public contracts. So, a lot of money's on the table at the moment. 412 billion approximately is being spent annually in the UK on goods and services by contracting authorities. That's a lot of money, isn't it? And it would be very nice to be part of that pie. Let's let's admit that. So I think, thinking about a matrix like this to help you with partner selection, where I do see some challenges with consortia working is that they work collaboratively based on strengths. That means they might develop competitive behavior as they start to, because they all have the same, they're bringing the same strengths to the party, as it were. And it's not a complement of strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. Where it can work, where all organizations within the consortium have the same strengths, is where you may geographically be displaced. Yeah, you may be located in different areas. So these are really important factors to think about. Thank you. Next slide. One of the other important areas is to think about how you structure the partnership. And I think this is absolutely critical. If consortium working is going to be right for you, there's 2 models that I would suggest you use. One is what's called the lead body model, and one is called the special purpose vehicle model, abbreviated as SPV. The lead body model is probably the one that's most relevant because it can very quick and easy to set up. Basically, what you've got here is you might have an illustration here. You've got 4 organizations who are working in a consortium together. And one of the organizations decides to be the lead. That means that they become the main point of contact with the public client. Okay. But what it does mean is very different to a subcontracting arrangement. Regardless of whether you're the lead body or not, every member within the consortium has equal rights to making decisions together, equal opportunities to learn together, to grow together, and to develop value together. Okay, so much greater assurance of actually of being part of that contract opportunity and so on. So, really important to think about the way that you structure that partnership. Quite often the lead body is the one with the highest turnover, and it may be that they have a lot of experience previously with working in the public sector. All right, so we'll move to the next phase. There's obviously a lot more that I could go into, but just kind of giving you a little bit of an insight into what I think are the critical areas. Okay, and as I mentioned, think about what the exit would look like. So when you come to the end of the contract period, what are the things that you might need to consider, such as shared resources? That might be that you're sharing equipment. It might be they're sharing offices, office space. You've been obviously sharing information, knowledge. What happens to that knowledge at the end of it? What happens to those databases? And really importantly, financially, what happens to the financial arrangements and who's going to be responsible for that? Obviously, what we want is business continuity, and you would be the incumbent supplier, and how can you possibly look to go forward and retender for that opportunity again? What can you learn from this particular project that you can take forward to help you grow in the future? Thank you. Next slide. So there are massive benefits of doing this. Of course, I've absolutely skimmed past quite a few of these things here, but hopefully it's given you something to think about, and very happy to take any questions on that today or in the future. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And I know that the What Impact team are very happy to take questions. And if you can't answer them today, we will in the future. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think we might have time for a couple of questions.